Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever in the world you are. Tonight, I would like to deal with a report from a United States-based think tank, the Council on Foreign Relations. They have come up with a report condemning SADC leaders for burying their heads in the sand following Zanu PF rigged election, 2023 rigged elections. I think that one, no one would disagree with that. Yes, Zanu PF must be condemned, denounced for rigging the elections. This is not just a right that has been denied. The failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections is the very essence of good governance, or rather bad governance, and explains why Zimbabwe is a failed state. So this issue of rigged elections is at the very heart of Zimbabwe's struggle to end its political, economic, and social crisis. And SADC must be rightly condemned for sweeping under the carpet its own SADC election observer team report that condemned the August elections as a farce. That report was very clear. Zimbabwe's election process had failed to meet SADC's own principles and guidelines on free, fair, and credible elections. And so the condemnation of Zanu PF and SADC is absolutely spot on. However, one has got to note the disappointment with this foreign relations, this Council on Foreign Relations. We cannot keep on pretending that in Zimbabwe, the root cause of our problem is Zanu PF. That notion has got to be dismissed. The opposition in Zimbabwe has played a crucial role in our political mess. There is no denying that, particularly during the GNU of 2008 to 2013, the opposition had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms and end the Zanu PF dictatorship. It's shocking that even now, a decade after the GNU, that anyone should still fail to grasp that problem, particularly an organization which is supposed to be a think tank. That's ridiculous. We are not going to solve our political problem by pretending that Zanu PF is the only problem that we are facing. Zanu PF has survived, particularly during the GNU and ever since, thanks to the greedy and incompetence of MDC/CCC. These last elections went ahead even when everybody was saying we should implement the democratic reforms. Chamisa and his friends insisted in the elections going ahead, adamant that they would win those elections. This is a video of Chamisa. This is on voting day, still maintaining that Triple C would win these elections. Let's just listen to it.
As Zimbabwe's main opposition leader Nelson Chamisa voted Wednesday, victory was certain in his eyes. He cast his ballot in Harare. Zimbabwe goes to the polls for presidential and legislative elections. The 45-year-old vies to defeat incumbent 80-year-old head of state Emerson Mnangagwa.
There's no way there's not going to be a new government in this country. There's going to be a new leader, a new president, a new government. We are winning this election. We've won this election. They know it. That's why they are panicking. That's why they are conniving with ZEC to do all these funny games. Funny games or no funny games, our victory is certain. We have won this election, and we are going to continue to insist on peace and on a credible election and making sure that we have a legitimate outcome out of this election.
This is the nonsense that we've put up with. Everybody says we can only have free, fair, and credible elections if we implement the reforms. And here is somebody insisting that we do not need reforms. They have got winning in rigged elections strategies. On one occasion, he was even boasting that he has plugged all the vote rigging holes, loopholes, and Triple C was going to win big. And yet the day after the election, he was the one claiming that the elections were rigged. We can't keep on repeating the same mistake. Let's agree that we need reforms. These are the measures by which we will have free, fair, and credible elections. Meet those standards. We didn't even have a verified voters roll. And yet somebody claims he's going to win these elections. He has won these elections. It turned out that this election, it didn't even have enough election agents at the polling stations. It's becoming a cycle repeated over and over again. And this is what is so annoying about this. We have got an opposition here that had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms. Let's get that one very clear during the GNU. And credit where credit is due. SADC leaders, notably South Africa's Minister Lindiwe Zulu, played a very active role during the GNU to try to get Morgan Tsvangirai, Tendai Biti, Nelson Chamisa, and all the other MDC leaders who were in power at the time to implement the democratic reforms so that elections are free, fair, and credible. Not even one token reform was implemented. Not one. They participated in the 2013 elections, even after SADC had warned them that you should not go into these elections without reforms. They went ahead because they were cocksure they would win the elections. The day after the voting, they were the first ones claiming the elections were rigged. 2018, the same thing. This election, the same thing. Like it or not, the participation of the opposition in these flawed elections have given Zanu PF political legitimacy. And thus perpetuate the dictatorship. Like it or not, MDC/CCC have become part of the problem, part of the crisis in Zimbabwe. And we cannot pretend that they are somehow victims of the dictatorship. They are not. They are partners. Yes, the ordinary people are ignorant, naive, and very gullible. And they've taken a full advantage of that. The people participated in these last elections because they genuinely believe that CCC would win big. And to crown his argument, Chamisa would go on to say God is in it. And that seemed to settle it. Of course, God was not in it. How could God be in a process that is so flawed? You don't even have a verified voters roll. You don't even bother to have election agents at the polling stations. And you still expect to win big. The people of Zimbabwe have got to wake up to the reality that the opposition, while the people risk life and limb to elect the opposition into power on the understanding that they will implement the democratic reforms designed to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. The truth of the matter is, after 23 years of MDC being on the political stage, they've not implemented even one token reform. And it is here disappointing that even reputable institutions like this Council of Foreign Relations would still pretend that the problem is Zanu PF and Zanu PF alone. I think that is something that we can no longer pretend. We can no longer entertain. We need to deal with this problem, this case of rigged elections. We're not going to deal with it by pretending Zanu PF is the only cause. The opposition, the corrupt, incompetent, and sellout opposition is an integral part of our problem. And identifying the problem, the full picture, is important in our effort to solve this problem. I think I would like to just conclude by adding that there is still a chance, because some people are still maintaining that SADC are going to meet and have their council of elders coming to Zimbabwe tomorrow to deal with this problem of rigged elections. We hope that is still on the cards. Although at the present moment, it doesn't look likely. Still, nonetheless, if this doesn't happen, we need to address this problem. And that's why I think we need to start engaging some of our friends like the Council on Foreign Relations. Let's agree on defining the problem. And defining Zimbabwe's political problem as Zanu PF and also, yes, SADC leaders letting us down is only defining half the problem. The other half of the problem is the corrupt and incompetent opposition, whom we have tasked and entrusted the task of implementing the democratic reforms to end the rigged elections. They have not carried out that task. That we should be very clear. And they keep on pretending they're carrying out the task when in reality they are not. There was absolutely no excuse for CCC participating in these elections without reforms. There was absolutely no excuse why MDC failed to implement even one token reform during the GNU. We have got to identify the problem there as being corrupt and incompetent. And we can't keep on having corrupt and incompetent individuals and pretend they're there serving the people when they are no longer serving the people. This issue, will come back to it again and again, particularly if SADC fails, let us down, and sweep the SADC's own report under the carpet. And even if they did, we need to address this problem of an incompetent and corrupt opposition, because one of the possible solutions would be that SADC would either allow fresh elections in which they will supervise them, and we have got this corrupt and incompetent opposition coming into power. If they've already proved to be so corrupt and incompetent, I don't see how we can possibly expect them to perform miracles if they get into government. The other possibility is that the SADC would say form a GNU in which Zanu PF and CCC are the key players. That GNU we must reject, because both leaders from the two parties were in the last GNU of 2008 to 2013, and they failed to implement even one meaningful reform. It is naive to expect that this time they will be committed, they will have the political will to implement the reforms. I still reiterate my position that the only rational way out of this mess for Zimbabwe is to demand that we have got a national transition of the authority composed entirely of technocrats, in which both Zanu PF and CCC have absolutely no part to play. I insist on that point. I repeat that point. Zanu PF and CCC are part of the problem, are the problem, in fact, and they cannot be the solution. The fear is, of course, that Zanu PF will make the country ungovernable if they are not involved in the transition government. That is a reality, but it's a reality that we must confront, and confront it right now from the onset. If we're going to have democratic reforms implemented, we've got to confront Zanu PF and tell them in no uncertain terms that we want those reforms to be implemented. And tell Zanu PF in no uncertain terms that we will not allow Zanu PF to hold the country to ransom. Zimbabwe is a failed state, and getting out of this mess is going to require resolve and vision. And we can start that process right now. And we can also start that process by addressing, engaging some of our own friends. We appreciate the comments from the Council of Foreign Relations, but we also are disappointed in their failure to define the problem fully. This is not going to help us at all. We want to see the full picture, and we believe the full picture is that Zanu PF rigged the elections, and has been rigging elections since the country's independence. But we also want to see the full picture that says the opposition, MDC/CCC, have had many golden opportunities to implement the reforms in the last 23 years, and they failed to implement even one token reform. And ever since the GNU, they've been participating in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuate the dictatorship. That is part of the full picture. And we do not want to start addressing the problem without acknowledging what the problem is. Zanu PF and CCC are the problem for Zimbabwe. And the people of Zimbabwe must start to accept that as the reality if we are going to solve this problem. Thank you very much for listening, and good night.